Welcome to the KTVA Channel 11 Alaska Gubernatorial GOP Primary Debate with your moderator, Joe Vigil.
Good evening, everyone. The big day finally here. Welcome to a debate of the top two Republican candidates, hoping to get your vote in next week's primary election. Now, tonight's dialogue is presented on Channel 11, GCI Channel 907, and KTVA.com. Our broadcast will air for 1 hour right here with our web presentation continuing until 7:30. I am your moderator, and right now, let's meet the candidates. Mike Dunleavy, the former Mat-Su-Borough board president, entered state politics and claimed his first Senate victory. Forced to run again 2 years later after redistricting, Dunleavy won a 4-year term. In January, he stepped down to focus on the current governor's race. And Meade Treadwell, appointed commissioner to the U.S. Arctic Research Center by George W. Bush. Meade Treadwell also served 4 years as lieutenant governor. Treadwell is currently president of PT Capital. All right, so we've met the candidates. Now for our panel. KTVA political reporters Liz Raines, Emily Carlson, and rural editor Rhonda McBride. All three will be questioning the candidates tonight. Now, this is how the timing will work. You will have 1 minute to answer each question. Your opponent will have a minute to respond, and that question will wrap with a 30-second rebuttal. Now, questions come from our panel, our viewers, and, of course, the candidates. Now, when it comes time for your question to each other candidates, we'll give you 2 minutes for discussion. When you're almost out of time, you will see a light off camera, not visible to the audience. Then a bell will ring, just like that, when you are out of time. And out of fairness, we do ask each other that you please respect the time limits and stop talking when that bell rings. And if you go over that, we might have to take time to give to your opponent. So before we get into structured portion of our debate, you'll each be given 1 minute for opening statements. We went by alphabetical order by last name. Mr. Dunleavy, this puts you first. You now have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for having us today at this debate. My name is Mike Dunleavy, and I'm running for governor. I came to Alaska in 1983 as a young man out of Pennsylvania to a place, Alaska, that was full of opportunity and full of optimism. I came up, I was a teacher, principal superintendent in Western Alaska for almost 19 years before I moved just north of Wasilla. I'm married to my wife, Rose, of 31 years, have 3 beautiful daughters who are wonderful people. And I'm running for governor because I know what Alaska could be. Alaska has so many resources that if we master and harness these resources, we can create the Alaska we all know that this state, this great state, could be for all of our kids and all of our grandkids. We have more oil, we have more timber, we have more fish. We have tremendous opportunities. If we harness these with the right leadership, the right policies, we can create the Alaska, the wealth we need, the jobs we need, and we can create an Alaska for the future for all of our kids.
All right. Mr. Treadwell, you now have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Thank you. My name is Meade Treadwell. I was your lieutenant governor from 2010 to 14. Before that, I was chair of the U.S. Arctic Research Commission appointed by President Bush. I've lived in Juneau. I've worked in Cordova. Have been in Alaska for 44 years. Started with former Governor Wally Hickel. I'm running because we need to restore trust in our government. When the governor takes away your PFD and the Senate did not overturn that veto, I think Alaskans lost a lot of trust. I also know that I worked very hard with our governor when I was your lieutenant governor, with the legislature, to bring incentives to get new investors in Alaska. And then we didn't keep our word. We've got to keep our word. Second, I am pro-business, but I don't want to see the crime business grow. We got to shut it down. That's very, very important. Third, we've got to quit exporting jobs. That's what we'll talk about tonight in the debate.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. Let's get right into our questions from our panel. Just a reminder again about the time limits. 1 minute to answer, a 1 minute response, and a 30-second rebuttal. We will begin tonight with Rhonda McBride asking the first question. Rhonda.
And Mike Dunleavy will start off with this. Oil prices just took a giant step backwards, down by $4 today. And even before this, we were already in the deficit spending mode. As governor, how would you deal with chronically low oil prices? Would you revisit SB 21, new taxes?
Very good question. And so, as we know, oil prices fluctuate. Our biggest enemy in Alaska is the operating budget, an uncontrolled operating budget. And over the past several years, our operating budget has grown at rates of 5%, 6%, 7%. Our overall budget, including federal funds, has grown at about 13%. Under any fiscal plan, this is unsustainable unless we contain that operating budget somewhere around 2%. A baseline of about $4.1 to $4.3 billion is a good starting point for this. If we're able to do that, we can grow ourselves out of this predicament with the new oil finds that are close to the pipeline that have been discovered the last couple of years. We can then continue to examine our programs, audit all of our divisions to make sure that we have efficiencies within government, try and render out as much waste, as much fraud, duplication, and redundancy in the state government. I think if we do this, we won't have to tax and we won't have to cut our PFD.
Lee Treadwell?
Well, oil prices go up and down, but the main thing we tried to do is get new production. We've now had 4 years of a lost drilling season because we didn't pay our bills, and that's what I meant by bringing back trust. We also have to look at costs in government. The government is growing way too quickly. Our 3 biggest budget items include health and social services, education, and corrections. And I want to make sure that we look at the outputs for what we're spending to see what we need to keep doing. We have a very poor education graduation rate. We have a very poor return to jail rate, recidivism. It's a $10 word. We are not getting what we expect to get in health, and we have some of the highest health care costs in the country. So we do have to need to cut government, and we do have to expand our revenues. I've helped start tech companies. There's many, many more ways that we can grow our economy without changing taxes.
All right, Mr. Dunleavy, you have a 30-second rebuttal.
Again, we have to grow ourselves out of this. That's the only hope for Alaska's future. We are a resource state. We have to be able to harness our resources, explore, develop oil finds, getting a more vigorous timber industry going, and a lot of our mining plays that are located all over the state. If we're able to grow ourselves out of this, we won't have to worry about taxing each other or taking our PFD. But again, the cornerstone is going to be ramping down that operating budget so that the growth is no more than 2% a year.
All right, and Liz, you have the next question.
Mr. Dunleavy, this year the legislature took the historic step of reducing permanent fund dividends and using part of the permanent fund's earnings to pay for state services. You came out in opposition to that move. So, in your opinion, should Alaskans get a rebate for the last several years that they haven't received a full dividend?
I believe that the PFD does belong to the people of Alaska. The people of Alaska have allowed government to take almost 98% of all oil revenue throughout the history of the state. The PFD is the one way by which all Alaskans can partake individually in this oil boom that we've had, in the oil production, the royalty. I believe that what we did with the PFD, what the governor did, and what the legislature did to the PFD was wrong. I believe that should have went out to a vote of the people. I believe it belongs to the people of Alaska. And yes, I would do all I can to restore that permanent fund dividend.
To repay that money to
I'll work to that end, yes.
All right, and Mr. Treadwell, you have a 1-minute response.
Well, thanks. In the Constitution, when we created the permanent fund, we said that the permanent fund income, as it's defined by law, goes to the general fund. We also established the dividend program, and I support the dividend program, and I want a full dividend, and I believe we can. We got to go back. There was about $700 million that Bill Walker cut, which my opponent voted against having a joint session to overturn. It's disturbing. The second thing is that when the legislature did this, they did move to use permanent fund income for government, which I do support, but I support having the full PFD there. So the question is, how do we pay it back? All right? I would start with the first year that we did that the governor cut. Let's restore that veto. We can do that. The second is then we've got these additional years. Let's make this POMV thing work, and we can actually get more and larger dividends out to Alaskans moving forward.
All right, and Mr. Dunleavy, you have 30 seconds to rebut.
Thank you. The fact is that no candidate in this race, other than me, has done more to protect the permanent fund or the PFD. I voted against SB 128 in the Senate, which would have restructured the permanent fund. I voted against SB 26, which would have done the same. I introduced 2 bills, SB 1 and 2, to restore the PFD to the people of Alaska. And so I'll continue to work to that end because I do believe that the permanent fund and the PFD belong to the people of Alaska.
All right. Emily Carlson has the next question.
All right, so it sounds like you both want to restore the PFD and get it back over the last several years, what was taken. This presents a problem, though. How are you going to pay for it? It's going to cost a lot of money. Where are you going to get that money? Mr. Treadwell, we'll start with you.
Oh, we have a permanent fund which is now approaching $70 billion. Under the percentage of market value concept, if it grows to the height of Denali, 5% of that a year, the growth should be more than 5% a year. We cover inflation. Half of it goes to avoiding taxes. Half of it goes to a full dividend. There are many other things that the state owns. We've got enough land. It's equal to the size of California. Some Alaskans may want to take their dividend in the form of vouchers for land, toward a land sale. There's many different ways to bring this about, but we do have to come up with a solution for government and funding government. We need to cut. We need to make sure that we're diverse, and the permanent fund income and taxes will help do that.
All right, Mr. Dunleavy, 1 minute to respond.
Well, thank you. When we started this conversation 2.5 years ago, there was about $8 billion in the earnings reserve. Today, there's almost $19 billion in the earnings reserve. This is the account where the permanent fund dividend comes out of, and the other 50%, if we need it for government, comes out of. I will continue to advocate that we do have enough money under the old calculation to distribute a full PFD and still have money for government. We don't have to tax folks. We don't have to take their permanent fund.
Mr. Treadwell, you have 30 seconds to rebut that.
Well, I think my opponent's on thin ice. He was part of a Senate that balked. First, you had Senator Bill Wielechowski saying, let's have an overturn of the governor's veto. And Mike voted against having that discussion with the House. The next day, Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Chenault, said, let's have a joint session, and it didn't happen.
Okay, we're going to change things up real quick right now. We're going to have Mr. Treadwell. You now have an opportunity to ask a question of Mr. Dunleavy, so go ahead and ask your question.
Mike, it's good to be with you again. We've had a number of debates this summer. My fast question is this. I asked you about our differences in business experience, no business experience last time. Made you a little upset. You talked about lemonade stands and General Eisenhower. I know you like generals. I guess the question I have is, can you tell Alaskans, give us 3 examples of battles you've won?
3 examples of battles I've won?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, my management background in school district administration as a superintendent and a principal, there were battles every day in taking care of kids. There were battles every day in helping parents understand how the educational process works. There were battles every day in trying to get the adequate funding for our schools. There were constant battles in that management approach to school districts, having the right policy for kids, making sure that we go to Juneau and make sure that legislators understand what's needed for kids. There were numerous battles. Battles in the legislature, for example, when I was a Senate, I'm the one that stood up for the PFD. It was me. PFD, the permanent fund. Keep it the same. Those were the battles that I fought. I fought to get more oil in the pipeline. I was one of those individuals that supported SB 21 for that reason. So we've had numerous battles.
Go ahead and continue the conversation for another minute here.
So basically, I was asking for battles you've won, and I started out as a foot soldier in the fight for the 200-mile limit, get control of our salmon. As chair of the Arctic Research Commission, I got a presidential policy on the Arctic that protected food safety and also protected marine safety. I worked on Ronald Reagan's idea of missile defense. That was a 10-year battle that we had where we got people around the country to get missile defense to Alaska. That's hundreds of jobs and protected the country. I believe that when you're going for governor, it's very important for Alaska to go for the giant steps, to do the things that will expand our economy, do the things that will put people to work. And I'm not even sure in education, from what you've just said, that we've met that battle. Our graduation rate is abominable. Of 100 kids starting right now, 76 will graduate. 43 will start college. 9 will finish college. And I don't think you've won that battle at all, and that's been your profession.
Yeah. Mita, I wasn't the Commissioner of Education for the state of Alaska. And what's interesting is you talk about working towards and advocating for, but you've never been in the legislature. You've never taken a vote on anything in your entire career. I've taken votes. I've taken hard votes. I've made difficult decisions as a superintendent, as a principal, as a senator. You haven't.
Okay, we're going to continue this discussion. Actually, Mr. Dunleavy, you will have a chance to ask a question of your own in just a little bit. But right now, that actually concludes the first segment of our debate. Next up, we will discuss the future of SB 91 and crime here in Alaska. We'll be right back.
Elise Galvin, fighter, lifelong Alaskan. She'll take the fight for better schools from Alaska to Washington. Smaller classes, keep teachers here. Elise Galvin, our voice. She'll fight for people. Protect Social Security, cut healthcare costs.
Turning Alaska Around starts August 21st, and I need your help to tell Washington change is coming. Join our movement. Vote Elise Galvin for Congress. I'm Elise Galvin, and I approve this message.
The Anchorage Heart Walk is a celebration of health in our community. Mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, co-workers and friends, uniting in the fight against heart disease and stroke, the #1 threat to our health. Together, our dollars are funding the kind of research that keeps our hearts beating and brains healthy, like groundbreaking pediatric research or the kind of big science that created the first artificial heart valve. Join us on Saturday, September 22nd at Delaney Park Strip. Register now at AnchorageHeartWalk.org and come see your dollars at work.
Reality check is exactly what the name implies. It's finding that line between what people say and what they actually do. It's not news, it's commentary, and we've got a lot to talk about. I strongly believe everyone's entitled to their own opinions, just not their own facts. Listen, I'm not trying to tell anybody what to think. I'm just encouraging you to think. I want people to watch Reality Check and then talk amongst yourselves.
This is the FBI!
6 grenades on a chain. Cell phone trigger.
Kidnapping in Battery Park.
MS-13 had finally made their way into New York City.
Drop what you're holding, get on your knees. We just found another bomb.
Evacuate this building.
FBI, CBS Tuesdays this fall.
Everyone to the GOP gubernatorial debate between Meade Treadwell and Mike Dunleavy. Emily Carlson starting things off right now. Emily, go ahead.
We're going to start with crime, guys, because as you know, it's impacting everyone all over the state, especially here in Alaska. Every day it seems like a neighbor or friend, someone's impacted by a car theft or something in their neighborhood. So we're going to talk about SB 91, and we'll start with you, Mr. Dunleavy, because you initially voted for SB 91, and then you came out against it in its final version. If you're elected governor, will you support a full repeal of SB 91?
Yes. We need to repeal SB 91. It's got many holes in it still. You mentioned that initially I voted to send it over to the House, which I did, but the conversation went like this. It's a complex bill. There's a number of holes in it. We're going to send it to the House. We're going to make sure that the House can work on it. If the House does not fix the holes in this bill, as I explained to the sponsor of the bill, I'm going to be a no. That bill came back a few weeks later. The holes were not fixed in the bill. I voted no. After that, I also led in the repeal of SB 91. I sent a letter to the governor and to legislative leadership on November 5th of 2017, signed by a number of legislators, that asked that the repeal of SB 91 go on the call of the special session. That request was ignored, and as a result, we never did get an opportunity to vote on the repeal. But I did send a letter, and I did lead that charge to repeal SB 91.
All right, 1 minute response, Mr. Treadwell.
Well, I think the legislature has learned that you don't do that kind of experimentation in this way. I don't know if the criminals in my neighborhood who've been stealing things out of our cars, the kids who were shooting each other, have read the bill or not. I do know this. People believe that they will get off on their first offense. People believe that there is a catch-and-release law in Alaska. People believe that that we're not tough on crime. I will be tough on crime. I do want to repeal SB 91, but on my first day in office, there will be a series of executive orders, and that we're going to have the federal government, the state government, and local governments work together. We're going to put a circle around communities. We're going to get these drugs out, and we're going to have our prosecutors make sure that if there's a first offense, you're going to learn. You don't want to be in jail.
And 30-second rebuttal.
Public safety will be my priority as a governor. We will make sure that we have the adequate resources to hire the right number of troopers, the right number of prosecuting attorneys, make sure the courts are open on Fridays. I've had 2 individuals associated with my campaign in the last couple of weeks had their homes broken into, their cars broken into, and things stolen. Crime's affecting all of us. This has got to be job number 1 for the next governor, and that will be my job, is taking care of crime and making sure that we have a public safety approach that's going to make Alaska safer.
All right, and Liz Raines has the next question.
Mr. Treadwell, just yesterday the state released a report on crime, and it found that crime rose 6% in Alaska across all categories between 2016 and 2017. How do you plan to bring those numbers down?
As I said before, it's the fastest growing business in Alaska, and it's the one thing we want to put out of business. The first thing is cooperation. When I was in Governor Wally Hickle's cabinet, we put together a federal, state, local task force. We brought the troopers and the FBI together. We brought agencies together. We brought the prosecutors together. And we circled in on specific issues. We're going to do that with the drugs, the opioids that are killing people, over 100 people a year. We're going to do that with the first offenders and make sure that there's not an easy out. They're going to learn. And we will take executive action very intensively. Some of it you may not know until we succeed. All right? Sometimes there are sting operations, but there's just not enough of that going on right now. And Alaskans will know we're in the fight. Bill Walker has a task force on this, but Alaskans don't know we're in the fight, and we keep seeing it get worse.
All right, Mr. Dunleavy, you have 1 minute to respond.
Public safety has got to be the cornerstone of the next governor, and as mentioned, that's what I'm going to do. We need to have a comprehensive approach to public safety. We can't just hire a couple troopers or a couple prosecuting attorneys. We have to sit down and have a 5- and 10-year plan to regain Alaska from the criminals. When I'm governor, this will not be an open door for criminals. This will not be a sanctuary state for criminals. Those folks that are dealing death, for example, on heroin, they're going to pay the price. If they're going to risk the lives of Alaskans to try and turn a profit on the misery of our people, they will pay the price. And so one of the first orders of business when I'm elected will be in the budget. There will be resources dedicated to this process.
All right, and a 30-second rebuttal.
You know, we have corrections that don't correct. I think there's never been a better time to restructure our Department of Corrections, back up our corrections officers who are not getting the support that they need. Health and social services, behavioral health, mental health, helping stem addiction that is causing a large part of this crime wave is all of our responsibility. And we've got to bring them into the picture. Education. You know, when I see some of these kids doing really stupid things, and it's not just kids, but people who get started in it start it young. They haven't learned in education in our schools how to do it, and Mike could have helped more on that, too.
Thank you. Rhonda McBride now has a question. Rhonda.
You know, many rural communities have no law enforcement officers. Some are unqualified, and a few have even had criminal histories. So what would you do as governor to change this picture, to make rural Alaska a safer place, a place that has some of the highest rates of domestic violence and sexual assault in the nation? Mr. Dunleavy.
Thank you, Rhonda. As you know, I spent 19 years in rural Alaska, in very small towns. One village, the initial village of Koyuk in the Seward Peninsula, had 300 people in it. Then I moved to Kotzebue. This is where I spent my formative years in the state of Alaska, was in rural Alaska. I understand the public safety issues in rural Alaska better than any candidate in this race. I spent 19 years living out there, living with folks out there, and dealing with the very issue you're talking about. We have to have a comprehensive approach to public safety. We can't just piecemeal it. We can't just hope it's going to happen. As governor, I will have a 5- and 10-year plan to beef up the number of troopers in the state of Alaska, especially in rural Alaska. We have to look at making sure that the housing accommodations for troopers and VPSOs are adequate for those folks to want to live in these small communities. And we have to make sure that we have the entire system in place, because there's no point in arresting somebody if we can't prosecute them, we can't bring them to court and bring them to justice quickly.
All right, and a 1-minute response.
When I was lieutenant governor, we had a policy in the state, and I give credit to Governor Parnell on this, that any community that wanted a VPSO can get one. We helped, and I went down to the Trooper Academy and made sure that the training was going well, and it was. We need more of them. I actually went to funerals for both troopers, and frankly, we lost a village public safety officer as well. We have to understand that they're corrected. I supported the legislation that had them armed, and I agree with you, the standards need to be higher. We also, I fought to address the suicide issue in the bush, the trauma issue, this generational attempt that we had on Choose Respect. You know, Moms Against Drunk Driving changed the culture. We've got to change the culture on domestic violence and sexual assault and support the survivors.
Let's continue talking about this. We'll give you another minute, both of you, to have this conversation about this topic.
Well, as mentioned, you need a comprehensive approach. This has got to be job number one. You just can't talk about it. You actually have to put together a plan. And as we speak, we're working with elements of law enforcement. We're working with prosecuting attorneys. We're working with others associated with public safety and with crime. And we're putting together a formative policy now that when we get into office, we'll be able to roll that out on December 15th. And people will see that we have beefed up the troopers, that we have beefed up the Department of Law, that we're serious about crime. And the word will get out, once again, to the criminals. The word will get out to the drug dealers that this place is no longer open for crime and you've got to go somewhere else. We absolutely will make this the safest state we can.
Okay, thanks. All right, Mr. Dunleavy, it's your turn now to ask Mr. Treadwell a question. So go ahead and ask your question, and then, Mr. Treadwell, you have a minute to respond. Go ahead.
I mean, prior to June 1st, when you hopped into the race, there was very little information on where you truly stood on the PFD. You were president-elect of Commonwealth North when they testified in front of Senate Finance, which I was part of and was there. And they submitted also a documentation in which Commonwealth North asked or suggested, recommended that we reduce the permanent fund dividend, we restructure the permanent fund, and we look for new resources. A week and a half ago at a forum, we were asked if we would support constitutionalization of the PFD. We all voted yes except for you. What is your position on the PFD? Do you support the decades-old calculation of the permanent fund and the PFD, or are you looking at changing it?
So my position on the PFD as a member of Commonwealth North has been to go to the percentage of market value concept. And that concept's a little hard to explain, but to people watching, it actually means the amount of money available for the PFD grows. The other thing it means is that there will be money to support and avoid taxes, support the government programs that we have to keep. So that's been our policy. I signed a report on that in 2007. Mike, I hope you read it. As far as capping the dividend, I have never supported capping the dividend. I'm not sure which testimony you're referring to. We did try to get the legislature to think about diversifying revenue, cutting costs, and using some of the funds to help balance the budget and avoid taxes. So there. As far as constitutionalizing the PFD, I'll make it very clear. The PFD is not in the Constitution today. I do support a formula that says we take 5% of the percentage of market value, 5% of the market value, reduce it by inflation proofing, and split it 50-50. Now, if we're going to go change the Constitution, I need to make sure that it doesn't become a Christmas tree. I need to make sure that that we do other things that we have to do to retain our budget, like biennial budgeting. And I'm very happy to work with the legislature on that issue. But I don't think constitutionalizing it is an easy answer.
We're going to keep this going. That's okay. We're going to keep this going for another minute. Mr. Dunleavy, you can respond as well. But let's keep this open for another minute. It's an important topic.
So as you know, the PFD is very important to Alaska. It's an institution. And we have basically a relationship with the people of Alaska that was broken a few years ago. Again, I stood up against the changes in the permanent fund, SB 128, SB 26. I actually voted on it, Meade. I didn't talk about it. I actually submitted 2 bills to restore the PFD. These changes that you're proposing, would they go out for a vote to the people, or would you do it unilaterally as governor? Will you engage the people of Alaska?
First off, I can't do it unilaterally as governor.
I'm talking about an advisory vote. Would you be willing to send out an advisory vote to the people of Alaska in terms of changing the permanent fund or PFD, yes or no?
Sure. And you know how an advisory vote gets out to the people of Alaska?
Yes, it goes through the process.
It goes through a legislative process, and I wouldn't be a legislator. I'm an executive, okay? I want to see the state pay its bills. I started debate tonight by saying we got to restore trust with the people. They think there's going to be more PFD piracy. There will not be if I'm governor. And it will take a long time to change the Constitution, at least 2 years.
Time's up. We're going to move on as promised. Now it's time to take questions from our viewers. Here's one right now. Now, you'll each have a minute to answer the viewer questions and no rebuttals. Now, the first one comes from Shelley Gill. This is on Facebook, and she asked, what will you do about the opioid crisis in Alaska? Now, Mr. Treadwell, we begin with you, and you have 1 minute to answer.
Sure. Thanks, Shelley. Thank you for your question. And if this has affected your family, as it's affected people I know, over 100 Alaskans die every year from the opioid crisis. The first thing I did as Lieutenant Governor is help set up that prescription database that has helped keep some of the prescription pills off the street. The second thing I will do, as I've mentioned before, is try to bring the federal, state, and local governments together to put a circle around these drugs going into the villages. We can't bring our drug dogs into the post office, for example. There needs to be much, much more cooperation to get heroin off the streets, to get fentanyl off the streets. I may have mispronounced that. I never order it. All I'm saying is that we have to stem the supply, and then we need to work on making sure there's more beds and help for people who are addicted to get off it.
All right, and Mr. Dunleavy, you have 1 minute to answer again. What would you do about the opioid crisis here in Alaska?
This is crushing our state. This is crushing our people. This is crushing our country. I had 2 former students, 26-year-old young men who were married, had jobs, had families, had little children. They were enjoying their life, and they got in an accident at work. The other one got in a car accident. They went to the doctors, they got prescription medicine to deal with pain, and they became addicted. After doc surfing for some time, they went to the streets. They ended up taking heroin, and they overdosed. This is personal for me. This is personal for a lot of Alaskans. And I take this very seriously, and that's why I said early on that if you're going to deal drugs in the state of Alaska, you're not going to get a slap on the wrist. You're not going to be given a second chance. We're going to do everything we can. I will introduce legislation to deal with drug dealers harshly in the state of Alaska. We also have to deal with those folks compassionately that are addicted to drugs, and we have to make sure that we have the programs in place that can help those folks get off of heroin and off of opiates. Those two things, if we approach it from that perspective, included within a framework of a comprehensive approach to public safety, I think we can seriously reduce this issue and make Alaska a better place for all of us.
Okay, we're going to continue this, actually. Let's talk about the cost, gentlemen. How are we going to pay for this? Where's the money going to come from? Treadwell, Mr. Treadwell, let's start with you.
Well, the money's going to come from the general fund. There have been federal grants for this. I think it's also important to understand that when we don't address behavioral health issues, we lose people in the workplace. We lose productivity. We have people who can't get jobs today because they can't pass the whiz quiz.
But how are we going to pay for it? Let's talk about that.
We're going to pay for it with taking cuts from other programs, Joe. We've got to do it. This is not a left-right thing. This is a human thing. And I agree with what Mike said. I have lost two of my friends have buried their children in their 20s. Another one of my friends buried his best friend. And it does not make sense for us to treat this like it's a casual thing. We have to draw a circle on it, and the public will know that we are in the battle. We're going to be in the battle together.
All right, Mr. Dunleavy, how do we pay for this?
Sure. But when I was a school superintendent and a policymaker in the Matsu as president of the school board, we had extremely large budgets, $60 million in one case, $200 million in another case. We were able to find efficiencies by auditing our programs, by looking at what we do to make sure that the programs that we had, there was no redundancy, no duplication, and no waste. For example, in state government right now, we have a situation where we had 2,000 positions that were funded but never filled, which represented over almost $200 million in state government. Where did that money go? What did we do with that money? That was as of June of this past year for the previous year. I also introduced a bill to consolidate the insurance programs of school districts. A report came out that said we could save over $100 million a year if we did that the right way. There's $300 million right there. If we took a portion of that and shifted it into public safety, we could hire the troopers, we can hire the prosecuting attorneys, and deal with this issue.
It takes less than 1 minute to find out if you may have prediabetes, and you can do it here. So what are you waiting for? Just go to the site.
Hey everyone, I'm Melissa Fry, and I'm here today with some amazing breast cancer survivors to invite you to the upcoming Cocktails for a Cause. This event is August 16th, and it supports the Making Strides Breast Cancer Walk in September. Cocktails for a Cause this year at Willowa offers a night of music, prizes, and auctions. The funds raised by this event and the Making Strides Walk help support local breast cancer patients get to and through treatment, and it funds new research. Well, that's something to cheer about.
Yeah! I'm James Gaddis.
I'm Megan Mazurek. Tomorrow on Daybreak, Tay Tarantino joins us back on Daybreak for a mic check in the morning. He's going to perform his latest single, To Live and Die in AK, featuring Don McLean.
And getting out and getting to know Alaska, we head out to a popular hike at Hatcher Pass and show you a quick way to get back down. It all begins at 6 a.m. on KTVA 11's Daybreak.
Every weekday morning from 6 to 7 and again from 9 to 10. Daybreak on KTVA, the voice of Alaska.
Welcome back to the GOP gubernatorial debate between Meade Treadwell and Mike Dunleavy. Right now we're talking about the economy, and Liz Raines has the first question. Liz.
Mr. Treadwell, if you become governor, will you support the state's current project for a natural gas pipeline? And if not, what other large-scale project do you propose could stimulate the state's economy?
Well, I would support marketing our gas in Asia. And we have a project which has spent a huge amount of money on pre-feasibility. And the next question is, where's the money come from to do all the engineering to actually tie it down? We need to bring private industry back in. At the same time, we've had all our eggs in one basket on natural gas. There's ways to make things with natural gas on the North Slope. There's ways to export it in a wire as power. There's ways maybe even to export it directly off the North Slope that might be cheaper or smaller. So yes, I'll support this project, but we have to get private money in for the next round. As far as all other projects, I believe we can multitask. We can look at expanding our railroad. We can look at building some of the roads west that will open up resources. We can look at mariculture in Southeast. There are so many important big projects or big efforts that we have to do. We have as much land as the whole state of California. We have to diversify this economy, and we're going to say, what can we do with the state, where we're competitive to get jobs happening?
All right, 1 minute response.
Regarding the LNG project, there are a lot of questions regarding this project, and we aren't privy to all the information because of the confidentiality agreements as part of this project. So the average Alaskan legislature and others, we don't really know all of the issues and all of the issues embedded within this project. So as governor, the first thing I would do is delve into those confidentiality agreements, find out if this project is real or not. We have to answer questions such as, what is the gas going to cost at the wellhead? What is the gas going to be sold for to the Asian markets? What's the infrastructure really going to cost? Who's going to fit the overruns? There are a tremendous number of questions. And I think what's telling about this project is, when we began the process early on, a few years ago, the major corporations were part of this process. They left it. Now, corporations are in the game to make money. If they left it, that begs the question, did they think it could not make money? We all want to make money from our gas. This may not be the right way. We don't know until we delve into those confidentiality agreements and get the questions answered. But there may be another way to make money off of gas.
Okay, Mr. Treadwell, you have 30 seconds to rebut.
When I joined this race, I said Russia is cleaning our clock in LNG. Right now, they've built 14 tankers that are sailing past us in the Bering Strait from thousands of miles west in Russia, past us in the Bering Strait to markets in China. They're doing it at a much cheaper rate than we propose to do so with a pipeline. We have to understand what the alternatives are. I started my career in making the first attempt at an Asia gas pipeline project work. I understand the markets. I understand what we need to be competitive, and we're not competitive at this point, and industry's absence shows it.
Time is up, and we're going to change gears. Time for a lightning round. This is going to move quickly. Here's what we're going to do. The rules are simple. I'm going to ask you a topic, and then you're going to reply yes or no to whether you would make cuts to that department budget, okay? Yes or no to making cuts to the department budget. So we have 8 of these. Mr. Treadwell, I'm going to ask you the first 4. You can respond first, and then after the 4th one, it'll go back to Mr. Dunleavy to answer first. Okay, Mr. Treadwell, to you, troopers.
No.
Mr. Dunleavy.
No.
Court system.
No.
Public education, court system.
Court system, meet on Fridays. No.
No. Mr. Dunleavy?
No.
No. Public education?
Possibly more.
Yes or no?
No.
No. Mr. Dunleavy?
Not at this time.
No. That's a no. Okay. Medicaid? Yes or no? Mr. Treadwell?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Make it more efficient.
Yes or no? Is that a yes or a no?
Yes, make it more efficient.
Okay. All right, Mr. Dunleavy, you can answer these questions first. First, yes or no. Again, cutting these budgets, yes or no. Power cost equalization.
No.
Mr. Treadwell.
No, but, you know, it's not
okay,
a
that's a no
question.
Okay. Prisons.
Excuse me?
Prisons.
No.
No, no cuts. Okay. Mr. Treadwell.
That's one place where they have the...
Yes or no?
No for now.
No for now, okay. Pioneer Homes, Mr. Dunleavy.
No for now.
No for now. Mr. Treadwell.
No for now.
University of Alaska, cuts, yes or no? Mr. Dunleavy.
No for now.
No for now, okay. Mr. Treadwell.
We have to actually endow the University of Alaska with the land that
yes
Abraham Lincoln promised.
Yes or no?
No.
No. Okay. All right. Moving on now to our next question. We're turning to Facebook, social media. Lainey Welch, who you probably know or may have heard of, she has a 2-part question, and this is at Mrs. Fish, is how she's known, wants to know, what do you believe are the biggest challenges and opportunities facing Alaska's seafood industry? What would you do to try to facilitate the entry of young fishermen into the industry with today's exorbitant cost of limited entry permits, IFQs, vessels? So, Mr. Dunleavy, we'll start with you, and you have 1 minute to answer that question.
The question is bringing young folks into the workforce. Like all of our sectors, whether it's oil, whether it's gas, whether it's timber, gold, minerals, it doesn't matter. This is a resource for Alaska, and Alaska is known for both its fish and its oil. We have loan programs within the state of Alaska that can help young folks grub stake themselves into some of these capital endeavors, boats, gear, licenses, etc. We can continue to fund those programs so that the loans are there for young folks to get into these into commercial fishing. we have to manage our commercial fishing well too, because right now we're having fish issues across the state. If our stocks continue to be depleted, if our stocks are low, this acts as a disincentive for a young person to want to get into an industry that is in trouble. And so by managing our stocks well, making sure that there are ways for young people to enter into the commercial workforce and purchase boats and purchase skiers, I think we'll secure commercial fishing as a mainstay for the state of Alaska for some time to come.
Okay, Mr. Treadwell, do you want me to read the question again, or do you have it?
I think I got it.
Okay.
You asked about a couple things, but Lainey, we talked earlier today. It was fun to be interviewed on your radio show. I think that we have to look at the programs that are out there with communities to help communities bring permits home so that they can keep the processing plants open in their communities. And then we need to work with the communities to help lower power costs. We're shipping so much salmon to China for processing, it's absurd. The companies aren't making the wrong decisions. We set the wrong incentives. So that's one thing to help people get that. Mike is right about research. I helped create the North Pacific Research Board. I want to triple the amount of research. We've got to work on value added for fisheries. You know, in Iowa, they say they sell everything from the pig except the squeal. We can do much, much more there.
Okay, moving on. Plenty more to talk about when we come back. Topics for the next segment are health care in Alaska and more questions from you.
So you're going to stop an asteroid, save democracy, and that's just Thursday?
Salvation, new episode CBS Monday.
The Alaska State Fair has combined rides and admission this year with the new $50 Carnival wristbands. The new wristbands include fair admission and your favorite rides all day. Wristbands are available for either Monday, August 27th or Tuesday, August 28th. Don't miss a moment of the excitement and a great deal. Get your Carnival wristbands now at alaskastatefair.org.
This is the FBI!
6 grenades on a chain. Cell phone trigger.
Kidnapping in Battery Park.
MS-13 had finally made their way into New York City.
Drop what you're holding, get on your knees. We just found another bomb.
Evacuate this building.
FBI, CBS Tuesdays this fall.
Welcome back, everyone, to the GOP gubernatorial debate between Meade Treadwell and Mike Dunleavy. Rhonda McBride continues her questions. Go ahead, Rhonda.
Thank you, Joe. This is an astounding number to many, that 1 in 3 Alaskans are on Medicaid. It's huge, and certainly in an important arena for any governor. And I have a two-part question. First is, would you have expanded Medicaid as Governor Walker did? And the second, as governor, what would you do to protect the vulnerable yet keep the cost down?
No, my philosophy is you want to help the helpless without creating helplessness. And 1/3 of our state on Medicaid is a giant problem. Obviously, we want to put more people to work. And when they can afford to be off Medicaid, then we won't be paying that. But we also have expansion that happened before we did a cost containment study. It's a big mystery to me why, if somebody was already covered by ANTHC, and I've worked to expand our tribal health programs, why the state is now the provider of money for first resort. Likewise, people who are on veterans programs, and I've worked to support our veterans programs. It's a mystery to me there. The paperwork that comes with this is taking away from quality of medicine. So that's a big part of the cost as well. So I think we need to look at eligibility. I think we need to look at people who have 2 or 3 different insurance programs. I think we have to bring more competitive insurance here for the exchanges so people can afford what's on the exchanges. And finally, I think we have to work to contain medical costs.
Just, all right, Mr. yes Dunley. Or no? Oh, yes or no?
Sure.
Would you have expanded Medicaid?
No, I would not have expanded Medicaid until we went through the cost containment study.
Okay, Mr. Dunleavy, 1-minute response.
These numbers are astounding, and they're indicative of a sick economy. In other words, an economy that's not healthy. So we have individuals that need health care, but the economy needs to get healthy too. If we were focused on producing our resources, and that's what people need to understand, we're not going to have the programs going into the future if we don't harness our resources and create new wealth. If we do that, we will have individuals working and not needing to be on Medicaid. A lot more individuals that will be in the workforce. I've got 3 daughters. They work up at Red Dog Mine. This is a family wage type of situation where they're making pretty good money and can support a family. They don't need to be on Medicaid. With all the resources that the state of Alaska has, that we are not harnessing, that we are not putting to work for us, those resources could create new revenue to take care of the problems we've talked about, but also get people back to work.
Yes or no? Would you have expanded Medicaid?
No.
Okay, moving on. Reed Treadwell, you have 30 seconds to rebuttal.
You know, it used to be when we talked about health care, we talked about accessibility, we talked about affordability, and we talked about quality. And my big problem is that as we get into this whole affordability debate, we quit talking about quality. I lost my first wife to a brain tumor. I worked after that to bring clinical trials so Alaskans could be at the cutting edge. I worked with our hospitals to make sure that we could get the right kind of diagnostic equipment and so forth. Right now, we've got such a morass in the whole cost reimbursement arena that we're not focusing on what we need to make Alaskans healthier.
There's the bell. Moving on, an interesting social media question right now for both of you. Now, this one comes from Ron Holstrom on Facebook, and he says, now that the multi-million-dollar Disney film Togo about the 1925 Nome Serm run is being filmed in Calgary, Canada, do you still think it was a good idea to end the Alaska film industry tax credit program? Mr. Dunleavy, we'll start with you.
Well, it wasn't a good idea, but it was necessary. It was unsustainable. Tax credits work when they're used to set up an industry that can then function on its own and pay for itself over time. If you have an industry that can't do that, which it looked like the film industry was headed for, especially given the fiscal environment that Alaska had fallen into and found itself into, you have to make reductions. And unfortunately, that was one of the reductions that had to be made. And certainly, Alaska is a great place to make movies. It's a great experience for everybody, and everyone wants to know about Alaska. But in the end, if we're going to be funding industries to get them started, we got to make sure that they're able to take care of themselves and not continually rely on the government for more effusions of cash.
All right, 1 minute to respond, Mr. Treadwell.
I was a lieutenant governor. I'd meet with my counterparts. Every single state had a program where they were buying movies, buying movie production. There's no real way to win on this. And we're doing it out of a corporate tax. Now, you know, this is the revenue estimate by the state of Alaska. In 2017, we collected $86 million in corporate taxes. Sure, we could have a credit to give all that away to the film industry and try to get them here. I don't think it works. We actually collect more money from pot and alcohol and fish than we do from our corporate taxes in a $50 billion economy. I don't want to raise the rate. I want to raise the economy. And by getting more jobs that will actually pay those kind of taxes, there may be room for some of these incentive programs. But at this point, it's just way too small.
Okay, and our next segment, it's a controversial topic. We are talking about abortion access when we continue. We'll be right back.
Hey! Again! Nice dog! Heel! Not today, boys!
Across Alaska, communities are cutting back on sugary drinks for children. In the North Slope, parents and the school board worked together to create soda-free elementary schools. Now, parents provide only healthy drink options for their kids. In Petersburg, schools added water bottle filling stations. They gave every student a bottle so kids could drink water at school. This is how Alaska communities are helping kids choose healthy drinks. Learn about more ideas to help children grow up healthy. Visit playeveryday.alaska.gov.
Well, good afternoon, everybody.
Mike Picaro has had his finger on the pulse of Alaska politics for more than 4 decades.
Do you think this is going to be an important primary? You're going to go out and vote?
Definitely, this election's important.
Why he says this primary is pivotal, especially for Republicans.
So there's anger. I mean, it's visceral.
The races to watch, Sunday on KTVA, the voice of Alaska.
The Big Brother Season 20 house guests.
It's time to shake things up.
Came to play.
It's getting real.
Duh.
The whole house has just gone crazy.
Big Brother, live, CBS tonight. This fall, America's favorite news team returns.
Hey guys, I've got a great new idea.
Oh, Lord, here we go.
Whenever a guest tries to spin the truth, I just do this. What, too much?
Murphy is back. CBS Thursdays this fall.
Hey,
Hey, that was the truth.
Oh, sorry.
Welcome back, everyone. This is our final segment for the televised portion of the debate, and Emily Carlson continues our questions for the candidates. Go ahead, Emily.
Well, big topic in national news, as I'm sure you guys have been following. Will President Trump's nominee to the Supreme Court be passed by the Senate? We've got a lot of ifs here, but should he be elected and should he be passed by the Senate? And if the Supreme Court does overturn or severely weaken Roe versus Wade, then it would be up to the states to kind of decide on how they would regulate abortion access. So my question to both of you is, as governor, would you move to restrict abortion in Alaska, or would you keep it the same? And I think we're starting with Mr. Dunleavy.
Well, Alaska, before Roe v. Wade, was one of 4 states, is my understanding, that had abortion rights for women. I'm pro-life. There's no mistake about it, and I won't equivocate on that. I have no interest in expanding abortion rights for anybody, to be perfectly honest with you. The women that I talk to, though, sometimes they get offended because they think that they're pigeonholed into abortion or abortion rights is all that a woman is interested in. The individuals that I talk to, my daughters, my family, my friends, they're interested in safe school or better schools, a safer Alaska, an economy that has jobs, so they can keep their kids and grandkids here, a whole host of issues. On that particular issue, I'm not sure what's going to happen at the federal issue, but at the state level, we will still have, I believe, abortion rights for individuals. But I'm pro-life, and I'm not interested in expanding those rights.
All right, Mr. Treadwell, you have 1 minute to respond.
And if I said expand, I meant restrict, is what I meant. Restrict abortion rights.
Sure. We have our privacy clause in our Constitution. Our Supreme Court has read that liberally, even to the point where we are needing to pay for abortions that I don't think the public wants to pay for. I am pro-life, but I'll tell you why I'm pro-life. My mom left college. She got pregnant. She wasn't married. Somebody in the family actually was showing her how abortion was available then. And she made the choice, a courageous choice, to marry the man and have the child, and that child was me. And I want to support women who make that choice to make that choice. I have no illusions, though. Abortion will be available. And whatever the law says, people will find it. So what I want to do is help people find a way to keep their child, have the baby, and support adoption. We can save lives here, and I don't know what the Supreme Court is going to deal up for us. I don't know what our Supreme Court is going to deal up for us. I will move to protect life, and that's where I come.
Okay, Emily, do you want to clarify again, as we were talking?
I do.
Go ahead, and this is for Mr. Dunleavy.
I meant restrict. So, Mr. Dunleavy, again, my question is, would you move to restrict abortion access here?
We're going to give you a little more extra time.
Again, the best answer I can give you is I'm pro-life. I'm not pro-abortion. I believe every individual has a right to life. So I'm not interested in expanding, and would I move to make sure that individuals have the right to come into this world? I think that would be something I would look at.
But would you restrict it, though? Would you?
I'd have to see what the law that is being proposed, or the whatever the proposal is. I'd have to take a look at that to see if in fact that's what would happen.
Okay, we're going to move along, and Liz has our next question.
Mr. Treadwell, we'll start with you on this one. Donald Trump's presidency appears to have created divide among Republicans nationally between pro-Trump Republicans and more moderates on topics like tariffs, trade, our relationships with Russia and our allies, and frankly, his tweets. Where do you stand on President Trump?
I believe I can work with President Trump. I was chair of his policy platform committee before the nomination. After he was elected, I brought a group of people together to say, how do we get ANWR to be part of the tax bill? What's our strategy to get there? Grover Norquist, who heads Americans for Tax Reform, brought 60 conservative leaders to my house on this. I have been to the Trump White House 4 times. And each of those 4 times, people are saying, why isn't Alaska asking for more? You want more power and control on federal lands. I led a blue ribbon commission that came up with an agenda on that, and Alaska's not asking. So I say that, you know, I don't tweet very often. I'll just say that. But I will say this. We have to work with this president, and we can work with this president. And what scares me to death is that if we get another Obama presidency of sorts, they want to reverse these things that are real economic gains that we fought for a long time. So I want structural change with the federal government, and that's what I'll work for.
1 minute response, Mr. Dunleavy.
I think President Trump has been great for Alaska and great for this country, to be honest with you. And I'm talking about his policies. We got ANWR open. We have a tax package that was passed that gives Alaskans and Americans more money in their pocket for them to spend. President Trump has talked about harnessing our resources to make sure that America can grow and Alaska can grow. We're the premier resource state in this country, and under a Trump administration, I think we can look forward to developing our resources, creating jobs, creating wealth, and creating more opportunities for Alaskans. So I look forward to working with President Trump. I think it's good for Alaska, and I think his presidency will continue to be good for Alaska.
All right, and 30-second rebuttal.
My 30-second rebuttal is to say on the question about trade, we export much of our fish to China. The tariffs issue is actually aimed at us. It's aimed in the same way that their tariffs on ag states are aimed at agricultural states. I know our U.S. trade representative. I worked with him since the Reagan administration. I'm going to make sure that the Trump administration understands the impact of this trade war on us. And I'll say this. The president was rough and tumble with Europe, and then we came down to a much better trade relationship with Europe. I hope we can get there with China.
All right, time is up. We now move on to a social media question. Mr. Treadwell, this is for you. Right now we have a question from Facebook, and this comes from Joanne Blackburn, and she asks, which constitutional rights do you believe are optional or must be earned?
Well, I believe our constitutional rights are God-given. I look not just at the Constitution, but I look at the Declaration of Independence. I believe you have to earn citizenship in the United States, but that doesn't mean that a resident of the United States who's not a citizen doesn't have particular rights. But all told, I support our constitutional rights, and one of my challenges in this whole election is that we've had Mark Begich, Bill Walker, and occasionally my opponent talk about removing the rule of law and due process, and I will support your constitutional rights.
Mr. Dunleavy.
I have no idea what he just said at the last part of that. But with that said, I don't think you earn constitutional rights. They're inherent. They do. They're inherent, and all Americans, all Alaskans. I don't believe any of the constitutional rights that we have are up for question or debate. We all have them. We all earn them. They're part of our being, and they're part of the Constitution as Americans and citizens.
I'll give you 30 more seconds, both of you. If Mr. Dunleavy, you seem to have a question for Mr. Treadwell. I'll give you 30 seconds.
Well, I didn't understand what he was talking about in terms of I was trying to do something with rights of the Constitution. So maybe he can clarify.
No, I believe we all have due process with our laws. And, Pebble came up in earlier debates. I sat with you in western Alaska, where Pebble's not popular. But Mark Begich got his fingers burned by trying to take away their rights to apply. Bill Walker did it a couple of weeks later. He got, the Army Corps of Engineers ignored him. And then I've had a whole bunch of ads from you, frankly, saying that I should not have allowed candidates in the election to merge. They had that right, and I wouldn't remove due process.
Okay. All right. We're going to move on from there, and that concludes our televised portion of this debate. We have plenty more to talk about. The debate continues on KTVA.com, where we will discuss education, Pebble Mine, and other topics. Thanks for watching. See you on KTVA.com.